to the other night, where we have everything broken down into three categories: payroll and benefits, operations and maintenance, and capital improvements. With the water budget this year, we have, as you can see, 3 1/3 full-time employees, a half a part-time employee, which is a meter reader. We split that 50-50 with the sewer department. And then we have the ability to bring on a summer employee if we so desire at a later time. That's usually a high school or a college student. As far as the operations and maintenance, first of all, as far as the payroll is concerned, as you can see, the proposed payroll is $288,500 compared to last year's budget of $355,000. And as far as the individual expenditures are concerned, everything in here is basically the same as the past several years. We had everything broken down into different categories, like the chemicals, as an example. Those remain the same each year, except for the cost seem to increase. But and then the one thing that I did with this budget that was different than last year was that, same as the other budgets, we took the items that are really normal day-to-day expenditures that were in the capital improvements, and we moved those into the daily O&M. And the reason for that, excuse me, is to get a good feel for what it actually costs us to operate the plant each year, operate that on a day-to-day basis. And when you talk about replacing hydrants, replacing valves, replacing meters, those are things that you have to stay on top of. Those really aren't capital improvements that are replacing existing infrastructure. So capital improvements, once again, same as we discussed last time, are really those big projects where we replace several blocks of water main or install new water main to a neighborhood, or build a water tower or something like that. So basically, as you can see, the O&M is pretty much the same, and the only thing that we have in this year's budget as far as capital improvements are concerned, right there, is Scott wants to do an inspection on well number 4 and then also have it professionally cleaned. He's having a few bits of, I think it was oil. Does that sound right? Some oil or something in there that that he wasn't happy with and needs to get that taken care of.
If we're hitting oil, we ought to be selling it.
It's not the kind of oil that coming from the wrong direction.
No.
And then also the other project is to do the looping of the water main out on Route 47, and this would be from Apple Tree, what is that, Green Apple, that comes out onto 47, and then take that down to towards Bridge Street, not to Bridge Street, but towards Bridge Street to about the Stoddard Acre area and loop that into the existing main. And then this is the first phase of another phase that we'll be looking at later on, probably next year's budget, to replace the main on out to the other side of Bridge Street. But anyway, what this will do is allow that main that's going out on Bridge Street to loop around to Apple Tree and eliminate the dead end at Apple Tree, and then also have water coming from 2 directions. And remember, now that we've looped the other interchange, that should make a big difference there. So, like I said, this is the first phase of what we want to continue down the road with. And then eventually, we would like to extend this on over under 47 and eventually under 72 to provide infrastructure to the property on the other side of the west interchange. So, if that's not in this year's budget. So, basically, this year's budget, I also want to back up and mention that one of the goals for this coming year is to look at different kinds of water meters and see what it's going to take to start discussions about replacing manual read meters now with some radio reads or remote reads, whatever you want to call them. They have some different systems out there where you can just put a unit in one of your vehicles and drive by and read them. They also have systems now with technology that you set right here at the desk and take readings. And it's not something we're going to do this year. We're just going to look into it and have some discussions about it, get educated on it, because it'd be real convenient to be able to maybe check meters, say once a week or a couple times a month anyway, maybe once a week, to see if somebody has a leak. You know, you might pick up on a leak sooner than, because right now we don't know that somebody has a leak until we actually go out and read it, and then comes back, it gets read. Tony has to catch it, which she's pretty good at catching, and then you have to notify, or have to send guys out to double check it, and then notify the people. And sometimes, you know, you can go a month with a leak before the person actually gets notified. So it'd be nice to do that. It'd be good for us, because anytime we catch a leak, I mean, our goal isn't to bill you hundreds of dollars for a leak. Our goal is to notify you so you can get it fixed quickly, and it's that much water saved versus wasted. Yes, sir.
With this budget, I assume Scott basically prepared it, brought it, and you and he discussed it together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then as far as Stoddard Acres is concerned, when you ran that sewer line out that way to the Lutheran church, and was there a water line out there then too with that, or was it just that sewer line?
There's water.
Water. Does it go beyond the Lutheran church on that side, or just to the Lutheran? Yeah, so you're gonna have to take it all the way up to Green Apple. Is it 6?
Is that water?
Mm-hmm.
Is that, I can put it in.
Yeah.
So anyway, to kind of wrap up a little bit here on the water department budget, payroll and benefits 19% less than budgeted last year. Operation and maintenance 10% more. Reason for that is that we took what's typically in capital improvements and adjusted those up into the operations and maintenance. And then the capital improvements is 84% more than budgeted last year, because we didn't really have any capital improvements per se last year, since we moved that into the O&M. And the overall bottom line on the water budget is 1% less than what we budgeted last year. Now, one of the things that we're going, that we can also talk about is the water tank replacement project. And we're still hopeful of moving that forward, but we haven't, we're not to the point of putting it out to bid yet. And we're still gathering some information on it, but we know that that's going to be somewhere in the $400,000 to $500,000 range is the estimate on that. And that is a project that we've discussed previously, and our intention is to just simply take that and finance that project out. So I'll show that later on in the budget here as a totally separate, something separate from the water department. You can see what page that is, just to keep it from skewing the numbers in the water fund. Page 24. And I just show that as something as simple as money in, money out, because we plan on, or the discussion was to go to a local institution, borrow the money, and then pass the cost on to the users. And then, so we show it as borrowing the money, and then the expenditure being the same, which the balance is 0. And until we get the project a little further along, we don't really know what the exact cost is going to be, but we just have it just so that you're aware that it's hanging out there. Any questions on the water? Let's talk about sanitary sewer and I. If you recall, last year we lumped the sanitary sewer and the inflow and infiltration all into the sanitary sewer budget. There wasn't any interest in creating kind of a separate department there on your behalf and creating any additional fees to fund that, so we put it in with the sanitation department, and that's where it lies today. In the sanitation department, we have very similar to Water Works. We have 3 1/3 full-time employees. We have 1 1/2 part-time employees, 1 summer employee. And as far as the rest of the budget, it's very similar to the water and the other, as far as the categories are concerned. What I've done is went through and noted some additional costs above and beyond what's normal and routine in the operations and maintenance, because we've got some things that have to be adjusted this year. One of those being under equipment and supplies. We had to buy 6,000, I think, have they bought that yet? That incubator for the lab. They had to replace the one that was out there. And, you know, it's one of those things that we're required to have in order to run the tests out there. As far as maintenance, equipment and vehicles, we've got an extra $9,500 in there. We have problems with the meter reading wand, and so we split the cost between the sewer and water department to replace that, so that the meter reader doesn't come in here only to find that the readings aren't there. Some root cutting equipment needs to be replaced as far as the guys on the I&I. Some of the equipment's wearing out already. We've got a 3-inch hydraulic pump to replace that I have listed there. As far as plant maintenance is concerned, we have an extra $19,000 in there. We have a clear well and a mud well that are right outside the sand filter building. That's the block building in the very back of the plant. And John's got cost estimates on those of $12,500 and $6,500. And once that budgeted, because we're on borrowed time with those, so we put those in there only if they're needed. If they don't break down, we're not going to replace them, because we know that we're going to start talking about a new sewer plant here before long, so we don't want to spend money out there unless we absolutely have to, but we do want to have it listed there, and hopefully we won't have to replace those, but if we do, we've got a budget. As far as the collection system is concerned, we have an additional $10,000 in there. The guys have identified 4 manholes that need to be, 3 of them need to be replaced and 1 needs to be installed. They've been working with Abe to identify these, and I think 3 of them, 3 of the manholes to be replaced are down at between William and Monroe. What's the Lockmiller place there? The dead end? The Meadows, thank you. There are 3 fiberglass, aren't they? 3 fiberglass manholes down there that are leaking terribly, and they're such that you can't really go in and line them or anything, so we're just going to have to replace them with something new and waterproof. And for any of you that have been down there, you probably know that's a major drainage area. You know, a lot of the Pratt's Road, the Wilkie Complex, ends up coming down under Market Street there by Dr. Hudson's office, and then catty corners right down past these. So I think we should see some improvement there, and obviously just right upstream of these 3 manholes is one of the manholes at the intersection there on Monroe Street where we actually set a pump during storm events. And then there's 4, and then the 4th one is a manhole that we need to install out in Surrey Hill. There's not a manhole there. What is it? T?
Just a T on 2 mains.
And we need to get that replaced so that we can go in and clean that the way it's supposed to be. And then there are 4 point repairs that they've identified that are going to be more than just a simple fix, so we have some money in there as well. The big expense this year that we have added, it's something new, it's slip lining. And the slip lining, let me pull a map up here. lining is in this area here, this area, down around Emerson and Longview. I have Livingston on your printout, but that should be Longview. Apologize for that. But anyway, this line that's circled there is an area that has a lot of inflow coming into it and infiltration. And they feel that slip lining that area, that's not something that we can dig up and replace. So slip lining is the most cost-effective way of addressing that situation. You agree with that, Abe? Anything additional there?
It'll be a good, get our feet wet on slip lining, and we've got some documentation and some data of what that area is doing now, and we should be able to pull some documentation afterwards and show what the results actually are.
That old Burgess subdivision was pretty mushy out there, wasn't it, Lyle?
It's a swamp.
That's the athletic field right
Yeah.
there. Just
That's
point of reference.
Yeah.
Okay. Get back up to this. So, as a result of the improvements that we're looking at and the extra expenses on replacement and repairing some of the equipment we have, overall payroll benefits is 5% more than what was budgeted last year. O&M's 51% more. Keep in mind, we did some shifting there with capital improvements again. And capital improvements overall are 17% less than last year. And the overall budget is 22% more than what we had last year as far as the bottom line is concerned. A couple things that I want to talk to you about before we move on are some ideas as far as sanitation and I&I is concerned. We've talked about the grease problems. I think every meeting, Alderman Brown mentions that based upon John's report. And we need to dig into this and figure it out. And I think the best plan of attack would be for us just to implement a grease trap inspection program. Some of our experiences in the past have indicated that some of the businesses don't even know they have a grease trap. And if they do, they don't know what it does, they don't know it's supposed to be maintained, inspected, or anything. And so, you can't rely on owners, we can't rely on the health department. We need to get in and start doing this. And my suggestion will be that we get into the municipal code and see what authority we have. And if not, then see if we can create the authority and set up the program and move forward with it. But we need to quit talking about it and move forward. The other thing that I would like to see is you consider is requiring the residents who have sanitary sewer available that aren't hooked up to them. And these basically are residents across the river. And some of you that have been around for a while, we talked about this when we extended the sewer west of the river, and we just never have really sat down as a group and decided to move forward with it. We discussed it a lot, but just never could get the decision to do that. And I don't know that it's something that we should just go out there and say you have to hook up immediately, because there's a lot of costs involved with that. But I think it would be reasonable to expect them, maybe we set a 5-year deadline or 3-year, 5-year, something, and then expect them to get hooked up within that time period. And, you'd be surprised at some of the experiences we've had here as well, where residents didn't realize they weren't hooked up to the sewer. As long as they push the lever, everything disappears, they think it's good, or they pull the plug on the sink and it goes away, and they don't realize that the systems they have are supposed to be running, they're supposed to be, some of them treated with chemicals, inspected, maintained, that type of thing. So I think that's something that we should we should consider here in the next year. And then the other thing that I want to talk about, and I'll pull the spreadsheet up here, is we need to consider increasing the rates here as well. And I know nobody likes to talk about this, but I'm going to highlight this, so I can slide this over. Keep in mind, this is this year's budget right here, and this is the revenues. And this is similar to what I prepared for the water discussion that we had October, November, and this is a very similar scenario here. As you can see, we are in the red as far as the sewer fund is concerned, and or as far as the sewer budget is concerned. And we're fortunate that we have reserves in the account to operate on, but we can't keep going like that. And you have a copy of this also, by the way. So I think the time has come, and we talked about increasing rates over the years, but I think the time has come for us to step up and go ahead and increase rates. And if you look at the page 3 of your spreadsheet, there is where that's at. You know, I did a similar exercise with this as I did with the water budget. And if you don't plug in any increases, these figures are far worse than they are right here. What I did is factored in, as you can see right there in this year's projected revenues, that factors in a 10% increase in the sewer rates. Now, before everybody starts gasping, nobody likes this, so don't misunderstand me, including me. I pay a sewer bill. But before you start gasping, we have to look at, and I'm not going to pull the chart up showing you how we rate or compare with other communities you all know that were average or less than several communities in our area. But if you increase the average user's bill of 6 units, it would go from $16 to $17.60. If you do it again the next year, it would go up to $19.36. So these aren't, that's per month. These aren't huge dollar amounts because our rate is so low. I like it, but if you plug in the 10%, and my recommendation is that we do it for the next 4 years and then reconsider, or I should say reevaluate after then, because that, as you can see, is where that last year, that 4th year, is where we turn the figures into black. And that's based upon increasing payroll benefits 3%, which we had that discussion earlier. Capital or operation and maintenance 3% each year, because the cost of utilities, the cost of fittings, the cost of chemicals always goes up. And then just sticking to a similar number each year, say $50,000 towards capital improvements, you're addressing your payroll, you're addressing your daily operations and maintenance costs, and then you're also investing money into your capital improvements. So I think this is a good, solid idea worth discussion. But there's what, there's where it all comes out. And then I've also plugged in the balances. These are the figures that come off the treasurer's report. And then added in the revenue, subtracted the expenditures, and you can kind of see where the balance shakes out. So, before we start turning this around, we're getting down to the $200,000, below $200,000 range. So, we need to step up and turn this thing around. It's been a long time since we've adjusted rates. So, any questions before I
Is there any feedback at this point? Jim?
With the anticipated another increase, the time that gets up and comes online,
Yeah. This is
on
total,
top of this?
yes, this is totally aside from the wastewater project. Wastewater project, we'll be in here in March and April discussing that. Wastewater, and just so you know, it'll be between $8.5 and $9 million. And to borrow the money to do that work, it'll cause the rates to go up considerably from this. Now, you can double our rates and we're still competitive with other communities. I don't like that, don't misunderstand me, but, sewer plant is one of those things, we're not gonna be able to push it off much longer.
Well, it's been
And
years
we're
since
gonna-
we did any kind of increases, and
Yeah.
now we've raised the water rate. We're talking about putting on a monthly fee to help pay for the tank, once that comes through.
Mhm.
Now, that would be one that would be on for a specified period of time, specified amount of money. When it's done and gone, it's gone.
Correct.
But then if we increase the sewer rates now, just to try to catch us back up where we should have been probably 5 years ago, and then look at a new wastewater treatment plant, and the anticipated cost of that being, as you said, 8.5 to 9, that's gonna be a big jump in sanitary. I think, look, if I remember right, that chart from Burns and Clancy, the only place that was cheaper than us at the time they did that was Decatur. And since then, Decatur's raised theirs 50%, I think, for the next 2 years. So we're gonna be at we're at the bottom now, as far as what communities charge. Similar size, we're still well below.
Yeah, a lot of communities go through this with the new sewer plant.
Others?
I might mention that during, as far as the wastewater treatment plant is concerned, if you will look on page 20, I've included money expenditures out of the working cash fund for preliminary engineering and design for a new sewer plant. Keep in mind, I don't make that decision and won't make that decision. That's a decision that you folks will make, hopefully over the next couple of months, after we've had some discussions. You'll say go or no go. The next step, as far as wastewater plant's concerned, is preliminary design. And so I plugged figure 400,000 in there for project engineering as far as the preliminary design is concerned. And the reason that I'm using the working cash is the working cash fund is there for us to borrow from, but we're supposed to be paying that back. And that was established, this whenever I first came here, so it's 19 years ago, I guess. And all the money that we spend on design for the wastewater treatment plant can be reimbursed through the IEPA low-interest loan program. And so if we want to go forward with wastewater plant, and we're sitting here thinking, where are we gonna get the money? I mean, we could take it out of the general fund or anywhere else. And then when the loan is wrapped up and we start getting the proceeds from that back in, then wherever it's coming from, you pay yourself back. So I think a good place and a clean place to do that would be the working cash fund, which we've never used since we've had it established. And let's see, you can start applying for not reimbursements, you can start applying for funds that come from the low interest loan fund, the EPA fund, the day the project is awarded. So every expenditure up to that point will be coming out of our pocket. And that's the date you can start applying for reimbursement. And like I said, all of this, matter of fact, the whole project, with one exception out there, qualifies for the low interest loan. One item is slightly.
Kevin? Oh, I'm sorry. So if we were to pay, whatever we pay for, even
discussed as far as a way of paying for the project.
Right.
We don't have $8-9 million.
Yeah.
So, and there probably aren't any grants out there. So the most attractive source that we could find was the EPA low-interest loan program. And that's what we've already talked about, that we applied for and already have the approval for. We're on the list. You go on their website and see our name on the list. And that we're eligible and qualified for that. And like I said, all of the expenses involved, except for sludge removal, the existing sludge that's out there, qualifies for the loan program. So we'd get 100%, except for the sludge, we'd get 100% loan.
Included in this loan.
Correct. But we can't start drawing any of the money until the day it's awarded. And so prior to that, we're gonna have preliminary construction plans, bidding, those type of things coming out.
What sort of interest rate do they, I assume it would be applied the day that we get the project let and the money, or is it 1%, 2%, 4%?
It's right close to the 2.
2?
Yeah.
Okay. And it's-
There are other funds available, like USDA has funding available there, and they have some different programs. Their interest rate for the one program we looked at was higher, plus the paperwork involved, and the engineering cost, the consulting cost to go along with that.
How long would it pay back?
We're looking at 20 years.
20?
There's some discussions going on to extend that 25 or 30. But I don't know that that's something we'd be interested in. I don't know if that's something that we would want to do.
Well, the last major project at the wastewater treatment plant was in the early 70s, mid-70s.
Yep.
85. That's very nearly 40 years ago. I don't remember what the rates went up at that time. I know they did, to help pay for the cost of what that was. And again, I think it was I think that loan was from the feds. I think they were doing a lot of wastewater treatment stuff and water plant stuff around in the 70s.
Kevin, you had a comment?
Yeah, and I may have missed some of this, so I apologize. Between fiscal year 12 and what you're now fiscal year 14, it seems like a huge increase in payroll and benefits compared to, I know we gave out a larger than usual raise in there, but is there an extra headcount that came in along the way?
We transferred one out of this budget into the general fund last year.
So now you're transferring it back in? I'm looking at fiscal year 12, 222,560, okay?
Yep.
And proposed is 276,500. Not an answer for right now, I mean.
And so last year we budgeted 263. See, 2013
Right, but the final year before was 191. I guess over the last 2 years, what was the huge increase? Because that's like a,
That was
Well-
I getting combined.
Huh?
What did I get
We
combined?
put the I&I in there, but also keep in mind, this 2013 is a budgeted number, whereas those other two columns to the left are actual year-end numbers.
right.
And so this, in 2013, would have been less than that, or has been in the past. I can look up what the exact breakdown is. I can't think of it at the top of my head.
Did John Hall retire in fiscal year?
I don't know when John retired.
Before that.
He's been,
Was it before that?
he's been retired for a while.
I'm not looking for a plus in delta between 2012 and 2014 seems rather large to me.
2012, 2013 is
2014.
roughly, or 14, I mean, is $50,000, and that's 3 budget years.
Well, 2.5.
Well, no, it'd be 3 because that's a full budget year. Regardless of the short budget, that's a full year's worth. So,
And then,
actually, it's 4 years.
You're also comparing a final number with a budgeted, proposed budgeted number,
Correct.
and proposed budgeted numbers seem to be more than what it actually happens. So we really don't know what we're comparing here, because it's not apples
Yeah.
to apples.
And as you recall, we didn't decide to go with actual numbers because that would have been comparing 8 months with a 12-month figure. And then an extended figure would be difficult because some expenditures we had in our short year, we expended 100% because they're like annual expenditures versus others, which were just for 8 months.
yeah, I mean, just in general, the thing, I'm just concerned, I mean, you look at history, 217,000, 218,000, 222,560, and now we're up to $276,000. I mean, just in general overall, it's, and the answer may be the I.
Well, we've got the I&I, but still, that's $50,000 over a 4-year period. So, you know, 12, 15,000 a year.
Fiscal year period.
13 would be 191, 195. That was a full year.
That was the actual spent, right?
Right, on the full year.
But budgeted was 263. I'd be more concerned, why did we budget 263 when we,
No, this is the
this is
following fiscal year.
that's 13 budgeted, this is
No,
13
no.
year in.
No, this is 13, the fiscal year, this is what's gonna get us into trouble, this wacky budget year, now that we changed it. 'Cause this thing's gonna be in here forever. That is fiscal year 13, but we ended in December. No, in May, in April.
It was the short year, right?
No, this is the short year. 2013B is the short year, correct? Floyd?
Correct. Yep.
That's the short year. This is as of April 30. So, that's so small.
The 12 months ending
13.
4/31/13, we spent $191,195. We are now budgeting $276,500.
I can go back and give you a breakdown.
Yeah.
Tell you exactly where that went.
We're still comparing what we actually spent to what we budgeted.
Agreed.
Correct.
Just to clarify, Kevin's concerns and all this,
I'm just-
noticing the difference. It
Yeah,
wasn't
I'm
just
just-
a breakdown, we'll have to have it immediately,
If
obviously.
we're on a certain, I just want to make sure that we're matching the increased revenues with reality of the increased budget. If our payroll and benefits are going to go up
Right.
significantly, then I don't think 10%, I mean, we're already at a deficit the next 3 years with a 10% rate increase. So we might need to reconsider that 10% rate increase and increase that so that we get into a positive situation because, I mean, yeah, he's escalating in the future years, which I think is the right thing to do, 3%.
But what you're saying is way more than 3% from what looks like. And that may have been that I&I initial inclusion.
Absolutely.
Write it down for us.
Want to do that?
Yep. We'll do that.
And the budgeted, what we, remind us again on that, what we budgeted in 12,
Yeah.
and budgeted in the short year, and budgeted, and then what we actually
Yep.
So we won't be jumping from one category to another.
Yep, we can do that.
Thank you. Other thoughts, feedback while we're still on sanitary?
Next thing to talk about, and this is a biggie, we're gonna talk about some street projects. And this is, the one area that I think that, we need to start addressing. And, we're talking about, as far as street projects are concerned, we're talking about asphalt streets. And we're talking about using funds, two different funding types. Number one, using some of the motor fuel tax funds that we've accumulated over the years. And you guys are all familiar with the motor fuel tax and how it works. As of the end of December, we had about $437,000 of reserves accumulated in that fund. And then the next fund that we're talking about is called an STU, Surface Transportation Urban. This is a fund that we don't have in our possession. This is a fund that IDOT has. IDOT has the money, and this 100% goes through IDOT and requires their approvals and everything. And IDOT allocates that money to communities our size each year, and it's available for us to use. And that fund, in fiscal 2000, IDOT's fiscal 2015, which is different than ours, they'll have about $526,000 available for us. And these funds can only be used on certain roads. What are those called, Terry?
There's a federal designation with it.
Arterial or something
Arterial
else.
collector.
They're major streets, they're not minor streets. And keep in mind, this is federal money that's passed down to IDOT, yes.
The 526,000 that's available, is that for everybody in the state, or is that just for us?
That's for Monticello.
And we've never touched this, we've never used this before?
We used this one time out on East Washington Street, out there patching that one lane.
Okay, yeah, I
You
remember
know.
that. Cut the part of it out, fill, yeah,
Yep.
okay.
That's the only time that we've ever used it, because we basically wanted it to accumulate, so that when the day comes for some bigger projects, we would have that there. And so now we're proposing that we start using some of those funds. The STU funds are an 80-20. You use 80% STU, and then 20% has to be a local match. And you can use motor fuel tax funds for your local match. So that's what we're proposing to do for these street projects that we're getting ready to talk about. The three projects that we're getting ready to talk about are over a period of 2 years. And part of the project will be in this year's budget, part of the projects will be in next year's budget. What we're looking at doing is Allerton Road from Marion Street to the city limits. That's estimated cost of $340,000 to mill off, is that 3 inches, Terry?
I don't think that was quite 3 inches.
But milling off the asphalt and replacing it, I don't remember the exact. And we'll be back in here, if you're fine with the budget, we'll be back in talking about these because you have to approve them. But anyway, it would be resurfacing Allerton Road. We'll be looking at Marion Street from Market out to Allerton Road, so from County Market to the golf course. Washington Street from Buchanan to Independence. These would be the 3 STU projects where we use 80% of the STU funds and 20% of the IDOT funds. As far as strictly motor fuel tax, which would be 100% motor fuel tax money, we are looking at Independence Street from Marion to Livingston over here, and looking at Pike Street from Marion to Washington. So those are the 5 projects that we're looking at. These are based upon traffic counts, condition, people complaining, there's a little bit of everything, and lots of internal discussion is where these projects came from. Yes?
The Allerton Road, Marion to the city limits.
Keep in mind that all 5 of these projects require advance IDOT approval. The projects all require preliminary engineering as the first phase, and they all require engineering observation during the construction. So these aren't projects that we're going to go out there and do ourselves. They have to go through IDOT, they have to follow IDOT's rules and the procedures that they have laid out.
Even the MFT ones?
Yes.
Quick question.
Yes.
MFT, that's what we use for,
Oil
oil and chip.
Mhm.
So is this gonna be in addition to our allotment of oil and chip money? So this is
Yep.
different motor fuel tax money?
This is the same account that we have for motor fuel tax, but we'll still be doing the same type of oil and chip projects that we've done in the past. Keep in mind, we've got $400 and some thousand sitting there in the MFT account.
And each year we get about 130 from MFT, from the state.
So we get 130, okay, I'm confused. 130 is our allotment of that fund, or 130 we get plus the fund bills?
We stockpile 400 some thousand. That's just every year we don't, we cut oil and chip back and we've been more prudent with oil and chip. And we've always taken in more money through all the years.
So that balance just builds up in a reserve?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good, it's good fiscal management, I think it would be called.
Lloyd, with the preliminary engineering for all 5 projects come from the motor fuel tax fund?
No, I have that broken out on this sheet right here, 2-page sheet, and will show you where those funds will come from. And here, this slide actually shows you as well. To do this, what we're looking at, as far as Allerton Road, and I'll break these down individually, then I think I have them total. In fiscal year 2014, which is the upcoming budget that we're talking about, we'll be looking at $3,400 motor fuel tax and $13,600 coming from the STU funds for preliminary engineering. So that's,
Okay.
in next year's budget, we'll be looking at $64,600 out of MFT and $258,400 from STU funds for construction. That's for Allerton Road. Those numbers total to $340,000. On Marion Street, we have $2,400 in motor fuel tax this year, $9,600 from STU for the preliminary engineering. Next year will be construction at $45,600 out of MFT, $182,400 out of STU funds. Washington Street, not a big project, $450 coming out of motor fuel tax, $1,800 out of STU. Next year will be $85,50 and $34,200 respectively. As far as the MFT projects and the budget, this year we'll be looking at $6,950 for Independence Street, $6,950 for motor fuel tax, and $132,050 for construction out of next year's budget. On Pyatt Street, it'd be $3,550 MFT this year for preliminary engineering, $67,450 for construction next year. And then to summarize, here's where the funds would come in 2014 from motor fuel tax, is $16,750 total. So that's what shows up in your motor fuel tax budget on page 19. Next year, we'll be looking at spending $318,250 out of motor fuel tax reserves. And then as far as the STU funds, remember, we don't have this money, IDOT has it. You're looking at $25,000 this year, $475,000 next year. One final note that I want to make is that the projects that we just talked about, keep in mind that the design cost estimates may vary depending upon results of core samples taken during the preliminary engineering process. And the preliminary engineering may show something else too. May find something else that hasn't been factored in. So these are very, very, very preliminary estimates and subject to adjustment. So,
Under the factored in, it sure be nice, and guys like this is talking in the balloon in just a second on it, and we'll pass on after that. It sure be nice if something could be done with the railroad bridge situation on Marion before we put, I know, but if we're gonna work around it, is there anything that can be thought of in the future to help that?
Terry and I had this exact discussion recently. And we talked about, how about if we just pull off of that, because, you know, we'd really like to make something happen with that. And he reminded me of all the years that we've talked about that overpass and doing something about it, and all of the lack of luck, for lack of better terms, that we've had getting anywhere with the railroad. We've had our engineers even talk to them. And to replace that, they have to take that whole thing out, because that concrete support is coming right down there. So to widen that the way you need to, that whole thing has to come out, and then you can only take the road down so far. We can lower the road a little bit, but you can only take it down so far. Then you have to start coming up with the railroad tracks, and now you have to start shooting back a long distance and start gradually bringing those tracks up to this point that you just raised. And therein lies the problem.
Can you at least ask them if they want to clean it up? I was driving through the other day, and it just looks like
I
garbage.
said, we'll support anything that you would like to do to it. If you want to paint it, we'll allow that to happen. They even sent me some, we were talking about that one and the one on Bridge Street. They even sent me some pictures. I don't know if I still have them or not, but a community took and had some tarp-like things made that had a design, a nice design, and then they strapped it somehow over the ugly to make it look like something new. Okay. They won't spend a dime on it. Said, this is something you could do.
Well, maybe painting would be a good idea. I mean,
Concrete's gotta be patched first, that concrete's starting to chip and fall apart. It's falling awful bad.
I mean, they inspect them routinely, but
Oh,
and we talked about, should we be doing Marion Street? And the answer is, back to your point, Vince, the answer is, we've wasted years, and it's not that I want to give up on the railroad, but we've wasted years talking to the railroad and getting nowhere.
Even if we did something without them, we're limited because of the width, and that is a pain.
Yeah. Width and height, and there's been very few accidents there.
it's been hit 3 times.
Yeah. It's kind of like the intersection at Market and Marion.
Yeah.
George hit it
So
once
IDOT won't do anything with it because there's
John
no
Seaver's did.
accident history there.
with a concrete truck.
Right, we need a bigger truck to knock it off its foundation.
They scramble when that gets hit. They really scramble.
Well, yeah, but we want to. We don't want to try and derail them. So,
So you're telling
Anyway.
us that assuming that the project falls within the estimates, we can do this with our current motor fuel tax fund that we have accumulated
correct.
in combination with the STU money and pay our 20% of the STU projects from the motor fuel tax funds as well. So essentially, we can do this without borrowing money or
Correct.
depleting general fund reserves.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's what motor fuel tax money is for, street projects. That's what STU funds are for, street projects. That's what it's for. And so we've just been putting this money in motor fuel tax back, knowing we're gonna have to do something, but you're gonna need a pretty big chunk.
One other question I have is, then do we have the latitude to cut back on one of these projects should these things come in way over projected expenses? maybe the first one we look at comes in over. We have the latitude then to say, okay on that one, but no more.
I don't know exactly how that works, but the final say comes through here, or the final approvals do.
Right. Okay, I just don't want to see us get into a situation that's way more money and then be trapped.
And we still have restricted reserves, right? Or, so we're not, it's not touching those. You mentioned IDOT. How do we go about that? I mean, is this something you guys have done this work? We just send that to them and say, hey, here's what we want to do, or we go a little further?
Terry's been in communication with IDOT, and is the next step having an engineer put this all together? How's that?
The STU is more difficult than the MFT. The STU, I've got to, if council wants to go this route, I need to send in paperwork for asking for STU money for preliminary engineering in IDOT's FY15. If they allow it, then we'll move forward with it.
So they just get a basic outline of it, and then you request, and they say, yeah, looks like a good project, or no, not.
So you could conceivably waste quite a bit of time, depending on what the STU people say.
Yeah, the guy wants it like yesterday.
Yeah, oh.
I said, remember who was sending it to.
Now, and then another time we talked about the amount of money that might be available if we complete something to taking over Old Route 47 and the bridge.
Yep.
And our responsibility to repair the bridge would not take as much money as we would potentially receive, correct?
Correct.
But does that money, being, I'll call it extra money, is it anywhere on the horizon?
I met with IDOT a month ago, probably, yeah, about a month ago, and they pretty much said that unfortunately they don't have money in their budget to pay us what they agreed to.
Right.
So, well, so I asked him, I said, what would be the chances of you providing some of that? Say, spread it out over 5 years? Because then we could bond or borrow off of that. We'd have the guaranteed revenue to make the payments, and they thought that would be a great idea. And they were gonna run it up the flagpole and get back to me. And he said it'd be a while before he got back to it. I haven't heard back yet. So that money is what we're hoping to use to do some of the other projects that need to be done in town. And then the big key here, this will be for down the road, we can't solve it tonight. Somewhere along the line, we are gonna have to find money for big road projects 10, 15, 20 years from now. Somewhere that revenue stream needs to be created and socked away. Because you're always gonna have the bridge streets, the Allerton roads, all the other asphalt streets. We're not, somebody else is. And we need to be thinking about revenue streams to fund those because, you know, hopefully STU will be around. Hopefully we'll have some excess motor fuel tax. I wouldn't bank on it because it keeps, if you recall, it hasn't been that long ago, we used to buy sand and rock and culverts and sidewalk material out of motor fuel tax. Not anymore.
Any discussion from IDOT whether they're in Market Street?
What did they say on that, Terry? It wasn't.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be 2017 earliest.
I mean, that's the worst street in town, I guess.
My suggestion is get a hold of your legislator and let them put the squeeze on them. Because, you know, like I told him, I said, this is pathetic. You know, this is the highest traffic count in town, goes right through downtown business area of Monticello, And it's the worst street we have in town. And you do all the other highways out here, the one towards 47 to be met, or Cisco, the one to be met, all the other. So I don't understand it. And he says, well, you know, the same can be said for all the others that we haven't done too. So like I said, Tim, I don't have any influence, so maybe your legislators can.
We've got Bill Mitchell's numbers.
I got
Just as a point of information, these particular streets that you singled out for part of capital improvement and using motor fuel tax and STU, the reason you singled those out is based on the conditions of the roads currently and traffic count on them and anticipated, you know, eventual total deterioration of them.
Yeah, we've started a pavement inspection program with surveying intern and public works employee. And they started late last year, so we're hoping that those two individuals will get back and hit it hard, see the weather breaks
And designate future ones that we need to address. Yeah.
and they'll place them, you know, in a scale, and, you know, this is level whatever they come up with. The public works guy has a lot of years of experience in that. So they'll rate them, we'll come in front of the city council and, you know, 5-year plan, 10-year plan, kind of lay it out there.
Right. And Floyd, you mentioned the, you know, revenue stream possibility for, you know, future road projects. Would that be something that we would use as part of a property tax increase, money to set that aside, or a sales tax? You know, there's been some talk of a countywide sales tax as far as the schools are concerned. I don't know, obviously we haven't tapped all of the different tax sources that are available to us. I remember we had one available when we did the electric aggregation that we didn't take advantage of, but that would be available again, I assume, in the future. So, have you identified any place that you'd like to see it come from, or?
No, what we'd have to do is just look at what's available, but everything you said would be something worth looking at. You know, there's all kinds of opportunities out there, but definitely something for the next generation, for lack of better terms, that are gonna have to deal with them. It's not gonna get any easier.
Others with feedback?
You've got 6 areas or 5 areas here that you're working on. What are the next 3 that you think will need it after this?
I don't know, I can say right now that definitely Center Street needs rehab over here from Buchanan to Market. But that's one of those, and the reason that it's not even discussed tonight, until now, is that that's not just simply going in and cleaning up, or milling off and overlaying as a concrete street, but it's full of infrastructure. And that water main needs to be replaced first. The storm sewer needs to be inspected, televised, and sanitary, all that stuff needs to be looked at first before we resurface that, or we'll be right back out. I mean, you've seen how many times the guys have been over here patching water mains. And
At least 5 in the last 3 years.
so we know that it'd be silly for us to do that without addressing everything. Matter of fact, we spent some time talking about that too, and that's gonna take a lot of internal discussions.
So Center Street.
State Street is another one, North State Street, not good.
Buchanan from Center Street all the way to Wilson, well, all the way to Grant.
The downtown streets, they don't need, I don't think they need a project like we were just discussing, but they need some type of an overlay. You know what they did 19 years ago wasn't bad. It was just a sand seal type thing, but look at it, with few exceptions, we're not out there patching holes. I mean, there's a few of them that failed, a few small areas, but for the money, there's a lot of bang for the buck with that. And that was 19 years ago, they were working on that.
Plasticizer, isn't that what they call that?
No, I think it was just.
It was they call it sand
Sand
seal.
seal.
Yeah.
It's only supposed to last like 7 years.
Yeah. They got rid of the NM initials all over town.
So anyway, on page 19, as far as the motor fuel tax is concerned, I tried to lay everything out there. I even put in a next year's budget, 2015, so you could kind of see what direction we're headed. I put in there beginning fund balances, ending fund balances, so you see where we're at, so no surprises or anything. And I think I have everything pretty well spelled out, similar to what I have on the slides here, so that going into it, you know exactly where the money will come from and how much will be left over when we're finished. So is there any questions on that?
So the 142,674 reflects the 5 street projects in that fund balance. You're going, fiscal
Yes,
year 20.
these fund balances over in the 2014, those reflect the fund balances at the end of this fiscal.
Right,
Over in the 215, those are the fund balances
with
for all 5
projects.
projects
Okay.
that I just discussed. Any other questions? Okay, page,
Yeah,
yes, sir?
what's the oil and chip for this year? What are we looking at?
I think identifying areas that need it versus entire neighborhoods and entire quadrants, is that correct?
What we did last year.
Yeah, kind of.
Make sure we do it.
When you take off and do a whole neighborhood because it's convenient, or you do a ward or a quadrant, say, because it's convenient, we feel like that's a waste of resources. Used to be it was fine, but now that the revenues are decreasing and the costs are increasing, I think we need to put it where it needs to be, period. And not just because somebody wants their street oiled. But I will also say that I think we've got the right formula for the oil now. Last 2 years?
2 or 3.
2 or 3 years, we don't have near the bleeding that we used to have. It's holding up quite well. We're not losing as much rock on the side of the road. I think we're all very pleased with it. And I think we finally got the right formula there that seems to work.
You've mentioned that before. Is that our responsibility to determine that?
It's like everything else, what the engineers tell you, and we weren't satisfied with what was happening, so we asked for it to be revisited and did a lot of discussions with the oil company and other things that prompted that.
So if you don't get on them, you don't get any improvement.
Rocking off the road, and it's been a dig,
I agree, it's been a lot better.
Okay, page 21, TIP district. As you know, TIP 1 no longer exists. We brought that one to a close last year, so we don't have any revenues coming in from TIP 1 anymore. So I'm showing up at the top of the page, it's taking $42,637, and that's probably not the final figure, but just shifting that into TIP district number 2. You can see there at the top line of TIP 2, just a transfer from the closed out account. Just putting everything in TIP 2. And we can spend that TIP 1 money in TIP 2. So there's not a problem with that at all. And then we're showing the revenue and the interest as far as the revenues are concerned. As far as expenditures, we have our administrative costs for the consultants that oversee all the TIF reports and everything that's being required. We have our obligation to Kirby Medical out there for their project that we approved 4 or 5 years ago. Kelly's Accounting is in there as well. Also made a water tower bond payment in there. That's not the actual bond payment, that's the balance after we close out or spend the funds that's in the water tower bond and construction account. We've got that, and it'll show up here in a minute on another page, but we're closing that out. It's money that's left over from the water tower project, and then also the, some of the rebate money from the bonds. So we're using that money and then paying the rest of it out of here. Pool bond payment, we're not making the payment out of here. It's coming out of the pool account, which we'll show here in a little bit. And then there's a gas main extension out to the Railway Museum area. And the reason for that is now that Cali has the brew pub looking at their project out there now instead of the Pepsi site. Problem is, once again, no natural gas. And that's been part of the problem out there in that area for years now, is that there's no natural gas out there. And especially this year with the price of propane the way it is. So we have money from the TIF district. We talked about that, and I can't remember now what project it was. We talked about doing that with TIF funds. It's been quite some time ago, and the project never came to fruition. I can't remember what it is, but I think there's like 10 potential businesses and one residents out there that could potentially benefit from that. So we're proposing to use TIF funds to extend that infrastructure, or have Ameren extend that infrastructure out there.
They do it themselves, we would not do that.
Correct.
But
We've tried.
We would jolly up the money, or a portion of it.
We tried to accomplish this before, back when, remember, we put the sewer main, extended sewer mains out there. We tried to get Ameren to go, or Illinois Power at the time, I don't remember which it was, to go right in with us, give us a line, we'll throw it in the trench, do whatever it takes to get the darn thing out there. But, you know, thinking simple like that doesn't work. So we're still, once again, another project has come up, but it won't happen without the gas. So anyway, that's really about it as far as the TIF's concerned. Let me see, over on page 22, this is where I show the actual bond payment information for the water tower. As you can see, we have the money coming from TIF 2, which I just mentioned on the top line. Then you have the bond rebate coming back in, which, by the way, we've received every rebate to date. I know at the time we had people questioning, saying the federal government never pay up, and that's a wrong thing to bank on, but so far we've got every payment just like they promised, so hopefully that'll continue on. And then down below you see the bond payment. Has some money in there to finish the landscaping out at the water tower, try to wrap that up. And we also are going to try to come up with some ideas on how we can kind of consolidate some signs out there and kind of pretty that up a little bit. You know, I love the fact that we've got so much to brag about, but, you know, it's like sign jungle out there. And we'd like to be able to come up, you know, the military signs look nice and neat and well done. I'm hoping that we can come up with an idea on how we can consolidate all the other signs into some type of a structure and make it look a lot nicer out there as well. And then on page 23, this is where the pool bonds come into play. And as you can see, you know, the $2 million bond is just property tax in, property tax out type thing. And then the $1 million bond from the pool, or for the pool, as you can see, we're starting out in this account. This is the pool construction bond account. We're starting out with about $138,000. That will more than make the payment on the $1 million pool bond. So we don't have to make this payment out of the general fund or the TIF account, either one. We can make it out of what we have left in this account, close it out and done with the project. Well, we won't actually close it out because we'll still have about $30,000 left over. And so next year, we'll start with that money, and then whatever we need for the balance will come out of one of the accounts for the payment. So, anyway.
So the $1 million pool bond, Tell us again, sorry to be slow.
We have two bonds for the pool.
Right.
We have $2 million that is supported by property tax. And it's levied, it's put right on the property tax bill each year. And then we have the $1 million bond, which we said we would pay out of reserves.
Right.
And have been. But this year, we have enough, first of all, the project is finished.
Right.
And we have enough left over in the construction and bond account to go ahead and make that payment, so it doesn't have to come out of the general fund.
And then how much will be left on the 1 million?
Right there on the bond itself, or the,
The bond
Okay.
itself.
have to look at, that board doesn't have that on top of her head.
Nope, you just got here.
On the $2 million bond, after this payment, we'll owe $1.931 million. And that will be paid off in 2024. On the $1 million bond payment, after this one, we'll owe, I'm rounding this off, $800,000, and that'll be paid off in 22. And on the water tower bond, after this year's payment, we'll owe $1.9 million, or almost $2 million, and that'll be paid off in 31.
I'm impressed you got that right at your fingertips.
There's a reason for that.
It's good fiscal management.
Okay. I think, on page 25, I just gave you a summary of the transportation improvement project. That's the same summary that you've seen for the last 3 years, so nothing's changed on that one. I just provided that FYI, doesn't mean anything.
Questions, comments, what we heard tonight? Kevin?
I guess the biggest thing that sticks out to me personally is sanitation. I don't like going, 5 years in the future, 4 years in the future under that plan before we can break even, before we stop losing. I mean, we should be in the mode of gaining revenue so that we have some revenue in this plant, to counterbalance the plan. And I think
What you're saying is you think the 10% might not be,
not enough. I mean, either we have to cut the operational expense or we have to get more revenue. It's that simple. We can't wait 5 years to draw down the balance, knowing that in 4 years, we're gonna have to build a new, or 5 years,
and bump it again.
and bump it again. We might as well start now.
Others?
I think that's very sound reasoning.
Yeah.
I think that's shocking, how much that's gonna be.
Well, John?
No more than we're broke than it is. I know.
I think it's our job to pick priorities.
Sure.
What's more important as you look through the budget? The
Sure.
budget is, Floyd did a great job, easy to understand. But
Well, it's up to you guys to decide.
I mean, we need to, as a council, we need to pick priorities. What's more important? Sewer plant or XYZ? Or sewer plant, fixing the streets, doing the infrastructure work, or whatever? And I think maybe we need to pick priorities
Definitely.
and get those fixed and keep working on the infrastructure like we've been doing and keep working more on the infrastructure. Because the sewer plant is gonna be a huge expense.
Couldn't agree. And it needs to be a priority.
Right.
Any other feel on that?
I think John's right, we've got to do the priorities, but, hearing about the wastewater treatment, raising the rates, you can't help but blame ourselves. We've been keeping them low, we've been keeping them where they are. We all know things have been going up while we've been keeping everything where it is. And we're unfortunately sort of to blame.
We're reaping the benefits.
Yeah.
Of nothing being
think it'd be fair to have Floyd prepare some scenarios that would reflect a little higher rate. I think it'd be also fair that we'd ask the council to share with Floyd our priorities, whether you'd like to do that tonight, or whether you'd like to do that over time for the next meeting. But we do have to share with him priorities that we'd like to see reflected in this budget before he brings a budget for us to vote on. So both parties have a little responsibility here, in my way of thinking. Tim?
I agree with what's said. It's nice to be able to say, let's bite the bullet and do the big one now, but if you look at, we've raised the water rates, and we're gonna consistently do that. We're anticipating another increase on the bill to help pay for the above-ground storage tank. If we're raising the sewer rate 10% now, that's 3 more things on the bills that people aren't used to. We don't know exactly what's gonna happen out of the sewer plant at this point in time. We have some preliminary stuff. What I feel would be the best thing to do is to do the 10% or 15%, but not much more than that, because we're putting some extra burden on people right now. And if we put a larger burden on them than it ends up that we need, that's not where you wanna be. I don't think that's being prudent. So I think a slight increase now, and maybe we will operate in the red for 3 or 4 years, but it's gonna be 3 or 4 years before you get to the point where you're gonna be doing something probably construction-wise out of the sewer plant. You don't know what it's gonna cost until they decide what exactly they need to do. I mean, this stuff we got is preliminary stuff, you know, the 8 million, whatever. So, in my opinion, I'd like to see us do a slight increase on the sewer rates now, because we've already raised the water, and we're gonna put a $3 a month charge to help pay for the above-ground tank if it comes in at the $450,000 to $500,000. Pay that off in 5 years. We could say to the public, well, we've increased the water, we're gonna put this on for the water tank, but it's gonna come off. We're gonna increase sewer right now slightly, because we don't know what the costs are gonna be, or what we're actually gonna have to do out of the plant. But be assured, there will be something. But then that time frame, we're gonna pay off the above-ground water storage tank, that'll come off. And then we can say, okay, we gotta increase it, but because that's come off, it's not gonna be such a vital. That's the way I look at it.
What would you like to see Floyd come back to us
Well,
with?
I think
15%?
I think you should come back with, you know, a couple different scenarios
Yeah.
of that.
Maybe a worst-case scenario and maybe something in between? You guys want to see that?
Yeah, I was looking at if the average sewer bill is $17 to $20, the 10% would be $1.70 to $2. That's a month. But then if you do it by 4 years, it goes from $6.80 to $8 a month. That's still not a monster.
No, it's not huge, but it's a steady that you can look at too, you know. So I think that, for me, that would be more prudent, but, you know, I'll go along with what. And I'm just trying to plan out, you know, what's gonna be taking place with the different projects we are gonna have to have over the next 4 years. The above-ground storage tank is a big one, you know. And I like the fact too that the other capital improvement projects in relation to the streets, the money's there. The money's there. We don't have to talk about a property tax increase, although, you know, a new source of revenue is gonna have to be considered, which I've always pushed for new sources of revenue, so.
Floyd, what's your plan for a subsequent budget meeting?
Your call. Just kind of waiting
What
to
do you
see
need-
what your interest is.
What do you need to cover?
Keep in mind that we have to have the appropriations, not the budget, the appropriation approved by the end of March.
Right.
And prior to that, we have to have a public hearing, we have to put a notice in the paper, those type of things. So I suppose probably the bottom line is I would like to have this budget approved by the next meeting. Not the next meeting, that's next Monday.
First one of March.
First one of March, sorry.
Mhm. So you'd like to have
But
this council come back with some priorities for you, with some answers on what you'd like to see them see you guys include in capital improvements. We had that list from the last meeting.
Maybe Monday night?
Okay.
Does that sound reasonable?
So have
You're the
some,
one that's gotta do the
Committee
work.
meeting of the whole?
Yeah, you gotta do the work, though, we don't.
Yeah, I like,
I mean, well, it depends on what all you want to see.
right,
I mean, capital improvements, I like the old days where you had them just up on the screen, go down one by one, and we'll talk about them, and then have some resolution on each one.
but we need that resolution by the next. at the
Really,
next meeting.
it's that way now. The capital improvements are one by one by one.
Right, right.
I like the division of the other way it was presented.
Oh, no, I'm not talking about present, I'm talking about the final,
But that's.
tell him what to go back and do.
On the capital
On the
improvements.
capital
Well,
improvements that we just
it's-
discussed.
I mean, you could sit here and think, well, this was gloom and doom, but it's really not gloom and doom. I mean, Gene to Christmas, the man's doing what we've asked him to do,
Yep.
and that is look ahead.
Yep.
Tell us what we're gonna need, put numbers to it. Now, it's our job to say, well, thank you very much, those are neat ideas. We're not gonna do them all right now.
This is what we want to do.
And that's what he wants
Right.
from us in the next couple.
At the next meeting. Okay, so put your priorities together. We need to pin them down so that we can adopt this budget and appropriation in the first meeting in March. Okay, is that reasonable? Lloyd, anything you wish to add?
No, I think I said enough.
All right, council, anything else? No? I think we need a motion then.
Move adjourned.
Thank you, Jim. Second?